Hello and welcome to the two-man power trip of wrestling. My host, JP John Poz. With me today, of course, super producer extraordinaire. You may know him from the Raven Effect or K100 with Konnan and Disco. He used to be called, for some reason, Mike Feeney. I have no idea why, but he's, of course, Joe Feeney. Welcome. How you doing?
Yeah, I think Russo got my name wrong for a while, and to Kenny Bowen, I'm still Jeff. I guess he was so used to Jeff Lane or something. But when we recorded on Saturday, this is the kind of time we put in on the K100 team. We recorded almost a three-hour roundtable music. It was the band Chicago, which Konnan, if you used to hear the songs on the show, he loves all that shit. You know, he likes a lot of music, but Chicago is one of them. My dad was on, Kenny Bowen was on, and our friend of the show, Matt Trevino. But we spent almost 3 hours playing songs and just shooting the shit. And I think by the end, once Kenny realized that my dad's name was Joe, it finally clicked for him that my name was Joe as well. But I'd rather be Feeney anyway. I'm not Joe anywhere except in this circle. I don't know how that happened.
Chicago, I don't know too many. I know they have a couple good songs, but I couldn't think of the song 25 or 25 or 6 to 4. Yes.
Yeah.
That's the one. I don't know if I know too many of them for 3 hours talking about Chicago. Jeez.
You'd be surprised. And everybody gives 5 songs, like their 5 favorites. And if someone picks yours, you got to redo your list and all this. It's always been fun. We haven't had a lot of time to do them recently, but in the past we did a Prince one, we did Tupac, we did I think Casey and the Sunshine Band, Kenny Bowen did, but the Prince and the Tupac ones are like phenomenal because you bring people on and you don't know, how deep their fandom goes, and all of a sudden they're telling you shit you didn't know, and they're picking these, rare songs that maybe someone who didn't know would just pick, like I Get Around or Keep Your Head Up for Tupac. You had guys pulling deep album cuts, and everyone had a bunch of good information, and those are usually good. But luckily I think the Chicago Roundtable convinced Kenny of my name, even though he DMs me and it says Joseph. I don't know. God bless him.
Wasn't he just in the hospital, Kenny?
Yeah, dude, he was in the hospital that day and came on and recorded that night.
Wow.
Yeah.
What a trooper. He really wanted to talk Chicago.
He really did, and then he DM'd me and stuff to be like, yo, that really lifted my spirits and everything. I appreciate you guys having me. Kenny's a good guest,
Yeah, definitely. I just was thinking, like, Chicago, I don't know if I know too much. I don't know. Maybe there's more than you think, like you said. Sure. Maybe there's more, you know what I mean?
And
as
far as
good songs.
Yeah, you know him if you heard him, too.
That's one of the things, too.
Like, yeah. I'm just going to take a shot in the dark here and assume you're probably a fan of the movie Shaun of the Dead.
I like it.
I would have thought that would have been one of the ones that you knew all the quotes and shit because you're pretty.
Oh, no.
But there's a scene in Shaun of the Dead where the guy's girlfriend leaves him and his friend's like, the hell with her, I don't know what you're so worried about. There's plenty of fish in the sea. And then all of a sudden the jukebox is on random play and the record drops and it's, if you leave me now, take away the, and it's like his eye starts watering. Who the fuck played that? It's on random. It's a good flick. Rewatch it. Get in there with Simon Pegg's a big liberal weirdo now, but Shaun of the Dead and what was the other one? Wow, I'm drawing up. Like The World's End was very funny. I didn't see that till recently, but his whole series of flicks with his boy, where it's like almost a shared universe, are all very funny.
Yeah. He was on the last season of The Boys, although he did not really have a speaking part, but he was on the last season of The Boys. I don't know if you watched that.
No, I read the first graphic novel. I watched the first season. Now, if you've ever read the graphic novel, you'd see that the character that I guess his name is Jack Quaid that plays him, right? Isn't that Randy Quaid's kid or something? The main character, anyway, in the graphic novel.
Is that really Randy Quaid's kid? Wow, I didn't realize that.
No, maybe Dennis. Probably Dennis. I probably just fucked up. But in the original comics, like the illustrations, they made that character look like Simon Pegg. So there's always been a connection with Simon Pegg and The Boys, yeah.
Oh, interesting. Very interesting. But yeah, it's weird. He plays the kid's father, who's like in a coma. He doesn't really talk yet.
Yeah, that's cool.
I guess they wanted to put him on the show. It's somewhat absurd, dare I say. It's somewhat absurd. What the hell is absurd? What's going on with absurd? What is it? What is going on with the latest from the Creative Control?
Well, I started with Creative Control, which is all like just straight up wrestling interviews, and that's when I was way more interested in trying to get in wrestling, I guess, which is like I've always said, I got a better chance of becoming an astronaut probably than actually writing a show someday. So I don't know what tapered me off. We went to WrestleMania in Orlando, and it was all the way back in 2017. And it was almost like that was the culmination of my fandom. Like I really started to lose it at that. Plus, if you look at the summer of 2017, it was ass, dude. It was like, Corbin was getting this huge push, and I wasn't a fan of his. And then you had, I think AJ was losing to Ellsworth, and what's his name? Who was the Indian guy that was champion?
Jinder Mahal.
And that didn't make any sense to me. And I was like, I don't trust this company anymore. I don't trust their ability to tell stories. So I just tapered off and off. AEW brought me back a little. I still love going to live shows at the arena, even though, as you saw, I went to a recent TNA show, and I just sat at the bar. Like I never went in to watch. I was just happy, just chilling. But so I changed that to Creative Control Daily, and I tried to get that going for a while. That was like a different concept. I had some of the regular guys on, like Husey and Durbin, and I had Steve Schreiber from The Sopranos on. I had Jackie Martling. I had this guy, Frank Lisiandro, who worked really close with Jim Morrison. I did a Jim Morrison episode, whatever. But it was just like a variety of crap that I like that wasn't wrestling, because I was so tired of it. And around spring 2020, when all the shit hit the fan and COVID, and then the George Floyd video happened, and I almost like, it was so controversial then to talk COVID or vaxes or what your feelings were on the George Floyd thing and all that. And I was like, you know what? I don't want to do the show because these are things I want to talk about. And I was like nervous about publicly speaking about politics or any current events, because of the way things were then and still are to a degree. But with Absurd, I've had enough kind of. And I was like, you know what? I want to get in. I want to talk politics, but I also want to talk about the bullshit in pop culture, or the DEI hires and all this, and how they're ruining franchises. So I'll get to some of that. But the first episode was just me kind of reintroducing myself and saying where I've been. I haven't done a solo show in a few years. And then the second episode, I found an article called, The American Dream is Dead. And I started going through that, reading statistics and all that kind of stuff. And with the shitty way the economy's been, and the inability for people to climb out of debt or college debt, or the inability to buy, healthy groceries and stuff. I just went over all that different stuff. It was like 30 minutes, kind of a ramble like this is. And so there's going to be some like that, but there's also going to be some, like I said, with pop culture and stuff. So what is Absurd? It's just a new show. It's a new idea. I'm just going to talk more straight up. I'm not going to censor myself anymore, because the thing was, and you know this too, if you're around wrestling and you want to get involved, and maybe you want a job, maybe you want to work in creative, maybe whatever, it's a dangerous thing to talk conservative politics. So I always considered myself like in the middle, leaning towards liberal, until Obama's second term. I started seeing things a little differently, but I never really wanted to go into my opinions on certain political things. And you can't come out as pro-Trump, which I've always said I'm not necessarily pro-Trump, but I am anti-Biden. I was anti-Hillary Clinton, excuse me. And so it was just different things I didn't want to talk about, because I didn't want to get painted with the wrong brush. I didn't want to get blacklisted. I didn't want to hear a bunch of nonsense on social media. And it was a lot more wild at that time, where if you expressed certain opinions, man, you're going to get canceled or blocked. So I think at the time I was concerned about, if I came out with certain opinions, how would that affect a future job that I wanted? And then I decided in the past few months, like, it's never going to happen, and even if it did, I'm not at the point in my life now where I'd want to go work for a wrestling company and travel. I've been working at home for a decade, why would I want to change things up, especially since I do all right financially? And if they wanted me to leave my house and come work for them and all that, it would be a ridiculous amount I'd ask for just to cover what I already made. And now you're also making me leave the house and add all this travel and stuff. So I lost my interest and probably the ability to get a job in wrestling, which I don't know, it was ever really there, maybe. But I decided, like, I'm not going to censor my opinions anymore, because I don't care if that costs me a job in wrestling or anywhere else, really. I'm just going to take the gloves off and stop being such a pussy. And so that's Absurd. It's just politics, pop culture, music, movies, the election, the Trump attempted assassinations. I want to go back to COVID and talk about the vax and the masks and all that time. And it's really just, like I said, me taking the gloves off and not being afraid to shoot straight.
Well, you mentioned Tony Khan dancing the Mercedes Monet. Will that be mentioned on Absurd?
I don't know about that, but I wouldn't be opposed to taking a deep look into Tony, because I think I got him kind of figured out.
Really? How so?
Well, I relate to Tony, which not a lot of people would admit that, because he's such a divisive figure and everyone thinks he's like a spastic dork, whatever. Maybe I am too, but I always wanted to book, and that was my thing. And when he taught, and I'm sure a lot of people did it. You probably did it. You play with your action figures, you write the matches down, shit like that.
Oh yeah. Yep.
And then I took that to like playing the promoter simulator games, TEW, Total Extreme Wrestling, I think it was called. Before that, it was Extreme Warfare. It's just, if you're into like fantasy sports almost, or if you ever play like football GM and that's your kind of thing, because I do that too. I like being in a GM game. Like, well, I'll run the baseball team, I run the football team. It's just the kind of shit that I like. This was a version of that for pro wrestling, and it gets really addictive. And you can pick any era. I was booking WCW 97, and then that wasn't enough, so I was booking WCW, WWN, ECW 97. I just had my notebooks and all this. So when he talks about booking through the notebooks, and I just see it, I understand, and I'm sure that he played those games, which I've told Disco. Disco jumped on it, and listen, now he says it all the time. He books through a video game. I'm like, well, that's not what I said, but okay, let's run with it. I said he probably plays the games, but yeah, I wouldn't. I met him once for a brief second, no big deal, But I'd like to talk to Tony someday and kind of dig in, yeah. And I wouldn't mind doing a show on him, because that's a pretty amazing life he's got going on there. He's running wrestling, he's running a football team, soccer, like that's crazy. And for like fantasy sports or fantasy booker nerds, he's got the ultimate gigs, really. If you take away the monsoon of negativity that surrounds the poor guy anymore.
Yeah. The thing is, though, obviously, his dad gave him this money. What did he want to do with that money? He wanted to run a wrestling company. What does he want to do with the wrestling company? He wants to book it the way he wants to book it,
right?
The way perhaps he used to in his notebook back in the day when he was booking Rampage and Dynamite when he was younger.
Yeah, I felt funny. I started probably, I don't think we were connected yet, but as the rumors began that Chris Jericho and Jim Ross are meeting up with this Jaguars executive, and oh my God, they've trademarked Elite and All Elite Wrestling, and I saw it coming, and I kind of thought that he would just be the money guy. I didn't know Tony was buying a play set, and I remember the first time I saw an interview or read an interview where he was like, no, I'm going to be booking the shows. I was like, huh. You got JR, you got Jericho, you had the Bucks, you had guys like Arn and Jake and Tully all there, and he has a lot of faith in himself, and he wants to present it the way he wants to present it. And hell, he's paying. I mean, I don't think you see a lot of guys leave or complain. I don't understand that. Like, I saw Miro wants to leave. The guy's making 7 figures. He's wrestled 6 times in 2 years. Now, maybe it's not just about the money, but some of it's got to be. I mean, do you really want to, like? I don't know, but a lot of guys leave, and I kind of get confused. You really got to make the best of the situation that you're in, especially when you have an opportunity. So, but maybe they think there's opportunity elsewhere.
Yeah, especially if you're getting paid to sit at home. I don't know. For some reason, that doesn't bother me. Like, I would do it.
Yeah, it's like we spoke to the Hardys earlier on K100, and Konnan asked Jeff kind of in the same area of a question. He's like, you really did some crazy shit for AEW. And Konnan was kind of just like, why did you do that? Why do you feel the need? What was it? Is it adrenaline? Is it you have to give the fans what they want? Is it just something that you have the competition with yourself inside, whatever? And he started talking about how he was off TV and he wanted to come back and work with Darby. And that's what reminded me of that. I was thinking, like, wow, Jeff was probably just chilling for $1 million for however long he was on TV. I don't even know. I lost track of his story at one point. He was talking about how he had to be off TV for a broken nose. I'm like, I don't know. Yeah. But
Sammy Guevara injured him. Yeah.
yeah. Well, Sammy doesn't mix well with the Hardys, right? That's crazy. But yeah, I wouldn't see a problem with getting paid to stay at home either. I always joke. I've joked with some guys in wrestling too that, like, if Tony Khan really hates K100 and he wants to wound it, just give me a call. I'll be a consultant. You give me $250. Sorry, Konnan, I love you, but got to take the cake.
Is he not a fan of K100? Because I know QT was on over the summer, which was a great interview, and he was awesome and came off really, really well. But does Tony hate K100 for some reason?
Well, first, I was surprised QT was on because we were trying for a while. And then he was in AEW, and then he was going to leave. And then he was going back. And I guess in his position, you don't know. You got to pick the right time. You don't want to be on there when you're angry and say the wrong thing or whatever. I was surprised that he was permitted. For sure. But yeah, it was an excellent interview. And I've known QT since I started around everything back in. Actually, it's funny. As I'm talking to you, I saw a Facebook memory. And the first episode I did at Creative Control was 10 years ago today. So it's been 10 years. But around this time is when I was hanging around the Monster Factory, and QT was a guy that I'm not sure how he wound up there exactly, but he got there after Team 3D school, and he'd been around Ring of Honor and different things. And Danny Cage, the Monster Factory owner, must have really liked him or trusted his ability to coach, because I went in one night and QT was just running classes, and I didn't know who he was because it was his first time there. But just from watching him train kids even 10 years ago, unbelievably, he's still doing it. And hearing him speak and getting a sense of who he was at that time, I knew he was really smart, and he had a good idea of where he wanted to go and how he was working on how to get there, which at the time I got to get in shape. I got to do this. I got to put myself in front of these cameras. And yeah, I was surprised about the interview with Tony Khan. Konnan's told stories on the air, so I'm not speaking out of school or whatever, but yeah, he listens to a lot of the stuff said about him, and he reads a lot, and anything that's framed, not that, K100 obviously is no punches pulled, so we're going to bury a show, those guys more so than I, if it stinks. But a lot of the articles Tony sees or YouTube clips, thank you, Husey, are inflammatorily titled. And, I just don't think, because Konnan and AAA are working with Tony, and I think Tony took any criticism as like betrayal. So no, the show's not popular with Tony or the most of the AW locker room. I wouldn't think. You saw Brody King just tweet at Disco like last week, like, go fuck yourself, like just a random tweet. You're like, whoa, okay. So yeah, not that popular.
Now, does Tony not like Disco, or does he not like what Konnan is saying, or is it more towards Disco?
It started with Disco because when Brody Lee passed away, Disco was one of the dissenting voices out there, like, because we were just in the midst of the first year of COVID,
Right.
And it's like, wait a minute, you got to tell us what happened, because we need to know if, there's athletes in danger or whatever. Disco's perception was like, don't sugarcoat it. Let's let people know what really happened. Did he get COVID? Did he get something related to COVID that, exacerbated a previous issue with his lungs or whatever? And not a lot of people were saying that. A lot of people were more focused on, let's let him rest, let the family be. AEW did a nice tribute, and Disco was focused on the story. So he's got a lot of heat for that, especially with Tony. And then Konnan now, because of his open, honest opinions on some of the things Tony's booked. And I mean, you can see it. You do business at the business. You know that AEW stopped working with AAA. They sent all these big names to CMLL. And to me, there's no way that that's not indicative of a fuck you Konnan from Tony, pretty much. Just my opinion, though. But no, and I think at one point we almost had him on the show. He wouldn't have done it with Disco, but he was still good enough with Konnan that it almost happened. But now it probably never will.
So he would have done the show, just his basically point of contention at that time was just Disco can't be on it, which is interesting.
Yep. Yeah, that was a few years ago when they were still good. Because, I mean, Konnan went into AEW a couple of times, and his performances were always good. And, they had I thought they had a good working relationship. You got to see the AAA different titles on TV, and, it just soured. It just didn't work.
And his thing with Tully was cool. Remember that, like, behind the scenes with him and Tully, and they were just kind of cutting promos back and forth. Konnan winning the promo battle. That was a pretty cool appearance. Yeah,
they did it face-to-face in the ring, and that's actually the night that he got hurt, I think, Konnan, when the pile driver hurt him, the spike pile driver.
Oh, yeah.
And I think it made, like, a hernia worse and shit like that. But he's older, and, I mean, a bump like that he doesn't do all the time, But he's a worker, so, he did what he had to do. But, yeah, and then that actually was an amusing story in the history of K100, because I tried to send Konnan promo notes. I sent him, like just bullet point notes, and he didn't use any of them. And what he did was way better than anything I thought of. But I did have like a good line in there. I wanted him to go after Tully about being like a phony preacher and going to jail and stuff like that. And Konnan knows what he's doing. He didn't need my help, because so I kind of sent it as a joke, but also like, hey, if you want to give this a look.
I was gonna say, are you kidding? Sending him stuff? Or are you serious? Yeah,
I've done that a little.
I've
sent other guys stuff that sometimes is used, sometimes isn't. But if I just have a thought real quick and it's someone that I'm comfortable with and that knows me, I'll send it over. So,
but I think he's got the war of words. I think he knows what to say. What I mean?
Yeah. I don't know what inspired me to do it, because it is stupid to consider maybe Konnan needs help, which isn't what I thought. But I just wanted to see what he thought of my ideas, and I don't think he hated them, but he was definitely like, dude, I got this. So
That's an interesting thought, though, about AAA and CMLL. If he's mad at Konnan, obviously Konnan works for AAA. He's the booker for AAA. He's not necessarily going to be too keen on working with him, so he'll rather work with CMLL. But that's kind of a little, I don't know, childish, I guess. I don't know if that's the right word, but that's kind of crazy, though. He's pissed, so he's, I'll work with somebody else.
Well, it almost, to me, we were talking about the McMahon documentary earlier. It almost seems like a Vince McMahon move. Oh, you did something I don't like. I'm going to work over here to try to harm your business, And it is all. I mean, it's whatever. I don't consider that anything more than it is just business, And sometimes it can get personal, and I think he did let it get personal. Obviously, if you're going to immediately work with a guy's main competitor and put their talent on your TV as big stars and send Chris Jericho and MJF to Mexico and Mercedes and whoever else, people that he never sent to AAA, mind you. You don't think Konnan would have wanted to use Jericho in AAA? Come on, man. Or
right.
like Brian. I think Brian went to CML too.
Yeah.
And but he got Kenny in the Bucks and guys like that. But still, having Jericho or MJF or Daniel Bryan in AAA would have been good for business for him.
Yeah, definitely. I know Brian wanted to work for CMLL or whatever because he wanted to work there for forever. But yeah, that's interesting. The Jericho Mystico match, he definitely kind of went above and beyond, sending him some pretty big names to CMLL
and under big money deals. You're risking that these guys get injured or something too, but that's what he wanted to do. So, but you'll never know. I mean, I don't know anything, so I'm not. This isn't like a hint, but. You never know with AAA, with NXT or TNA and stuff like that. Konnan's always got something in the fire, and he's always got ideas and relationships cultivating. So wouldn't be surprised. There's no problems with AAA. They didn't lose anything by losing the AEW deal, really. Their numbers are still whatever. Their attendance is still good.
Yeah, we see Konnan posting pictures. It seems like they're doing pretty damn good. 18,000 at Triple Mania. I mean, it seems like they're doing pretty damn good.
Yeah, I'd like to get down there at some point for a show. Before the shit banned completely in this country, but you never know, right? So
yeah, definitely, probably Tijuana or somewhere where it's close, but not not too far down there.
Yeah, or like they do like a Cancun show, and I'm like, yeah, that would work for me going to Cancun, So
yeah, definitely, it's just so interesting, like. They have Pentagon and Phoenix, but they don't really have Pentagon and Phoenix because AEW was using them. Now AEW possibly is losing them to WWE. I'm sure Konnan knows a lot more about that, but I wonder if maybe they could go to WWE and still work for AAA. I mean, who knows, right? I mean, that would be pretty remarkable, would be pretty crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I think WWE's a little more. They'll tighten the belt a little bit more about their guys going and wrestling elsewhere. But they've let Konnan use Ray in the past for a promo, or I wouldn't be surprised. Konnan, obviously, they let the guy main event the Hall of Fame. I mean, clearly, there's a respect level there between him and Bruce and probably Hunter. So.
But think about what they're doing with TNA and NXT. A bunch of those NXT guys were working TNA shows like Regal's Kid and stuff, and the Catch Point guys, and it just seems like they're a lot more open to letting the guys wrestle elsewhere.
Yeah, I forget that sometimes that it is a whole different company basically, and a whole different mindset about stuff like that. I'll tell you, I don't watch that much anymore, but it was very cool to see Frankie Kazarian come out on NXT. He was like, finally this guy, because he's been around so long and he's so good that it was like, that's one of the dreams in the back pocket. Like, I at least want to appear on WWE programming again. And then you'd have to tell me, I guess Shelley and Sabin signed, or they're in NXT or something like that.
Supposedly going to debut soon. I don't know if it's official yet, but that's what the rumor is. Yep.
Yeah, Sabin's very good, but I always thought Alex Shelley was going to be like the man someday. When he was doing the paparazzi stuff with Nash and his personality came out.
Yep.
And he wasn't afraid to make fun of himself, and that was just really great shit for him. And it didn't really ever pan out, I guess. I mean, Shelley became TNA World Champion eventually, but that was more recently, right?
Yeah. Yep.
But I mean, Sabin was pushed more back in the day, and I always thought Alex. I wouldn't have minded seeing him in WWE in that era with Nash, but wasn't to be.
I even used to go to ROH shows I mean, all the time in like 2004, and I thought he was going to be like the next champion, the next guy, and ended up being Austin Aries, which was a good, smart move. And Aries ended up being better than him at that point, and
Yeah.
kind of more of a complete wrestler. But I was like, wow, I was shocked. Shelley went one direction, and Aries got the big push. I just thought Shelley was going to be the one getting the big push, and God, that's 04 ish in
Yeah.
Ring of Honor.
Yeah, it's funny. Like, I knew of Ring of Honor, and this is when I was more of a hardcore fan, but I've always taken breaks. Around that time was probably a break. I took a break after Hogan won the belt in 93, like a lot of people say. I took a break after the Invasion was so shitty. I took a long break after Eddie Guerrero and Benoit's death, Candido. That made me look at it differently. But I always kept my eye on it, and I'd seek out a match if I heard something. So any Ring of Honor I saw then was like Raven Punk, Joe, Punk, Brian, stuff like that. So I didn't follow it, but I knew about it. I didn't see a Ring of Honor show actually live until Cornette was in charge, and they were running Philly. And a buddy of mine went to the Argon Diner over there, and like they just had stacks of tickets on the counter. He's like, "You want free wrestling tickets?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure, I'll go." It had been a while, right? So I saw one of their tapings for what was the channel they were on when Cornette was there? The Mark Cuban channel.
HDNet.
Yeah, ROH on HDNet. And it was weird because I was expecting Ring of Honor, and I kind of saw TV matches and like a lot of in-ring promos, and I was like, oh, they're trying to change it up. Okay, but people didn't really care for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was I don't know, to me anyway, a weird, I know, different era, and maybe not necessarily bad, but it's just weird to me because I used to go to all the early shows, and they were like super shows, like super indie shows, and all of a sudden they were like this TV product with kind of the squash matches and all these weird promos. It wasn't the same, but it was definitely different.
Yeah, it took me a while to catch up because like around that time, I always say I was going to 3PW shows that Blue Meanie
Right.
ran, and they relied a lot on ECW guys or like scantily clad chicks, and like it was like a post ECW but smaller. So I wasn't quite in the American Dragon and Austin Aries and ring work camp yet. I was still going for the wild shit, So it took me. I was behind on Ring of Honor for a few years. Yeah, I think that's a part of my fandom now because I always say on K100 AEW now, it's almost like they took Ring of Honor and PWG and a little ECW and like just meshed it together. Now all the matches are long. There's less story. And it just reminds me of how I preferred 3PW back then, which was more show over Ring of Honor, which was more work. It's just, I don't know. AEW, I go on and off, but I'm just not a guy who likes a 30-minute match anymore. I need story. So, yeah.
Depends. To me, I still do, but it depends on who it is. Like if it's Danielson, I'm all for it. If it's Adam Page and Swerve, I'm like, oh, come on. Like let's lessen it a little bit here. Let's give him a shorter match. But yeah, depends on who it is.
Yeah, I watched I guess it was the London one was All In again, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I watched most of that show, but I remember specifically I sat down and watched the main event, and Danielson to me, again, I said it on K100, it just reminded me of the glory days. And I know some people would say Ring of Honor was the glory days, but like I said, I wasn't around for much of that. But Brian on his march to the title in like 2013, 2014, and he was just tearing it up every week on Raw, and you knew he was going to give you a great match on pay-per-view, but he had developed personality and a relationship with the fans too. But so this match with Swerve was just like watching them 10 years ago in WWE to me. I thought it was fantastic. Now I didn't see the last one with the plastic bag and the, syringes and a vertebraker on a cinder block and all the crazy shit they did. But the last AEW show that I sat and watched, I did like a lot, but that was mostly because of the main event.
I still got to catch that. Heard it was awesome. One of Swerve, if not Swerve's best match. So I got to check that out. But yeah, then the next pay-per-view was all craziness. The syringe probably taking it too far. Yeah, that was a little nuts.
I remember I was at a handful of the first CZW shows, like in this little,
I knew you would like that. Yeah,
garage almost in Jersey, and a buddy of mine, a buddy of my dad, his friend was Rob Herzog, the referee. So that's how I got introduced to CZW, and that was like as a teenager and ECW fan at the time, because these shows were in like 98 or 99. It was so over the top. That's the first place that used a staple gun. It wasn't New Jack, despite what how history is framed. And then like weed whackers. I remember in the main event, I think it was Zandig who got his ass beat. But what they did was they held him down, the Hate Club or whatever the group was.
Yep.
And they whipped him on the back with barbed wire, and then they pulled out a little bag of goodies, and they had a bottle of Jack, a bottle of hot sauce, and lemon juice, and they were squirting it on all the open cuts. And you're like, oh, there's no way to, like, that's it. They're doing that. That's not real. There's no way to fake that. So as a teenager, that kind of stuff, when I first saw it, was like, this is crazy. This is great. But now in 2024, being an older fella, I'm not that impressed by it anymore. Like the over the top gore. Like I kind of laugh when, somebody will bring a bag into the ring and instead of tacks, it's like marbles or micro machines or something. Like I know that hurts because I've stepped on a micro machine, Yes, so kind of stuff like that. Yep. Yeah, Legos. Like I enjoy that, but over the top. And I think actually what killed it for me altogether was I watched specifically for Omega Moxley in the Exploding Ring, and it was such a popcorn fart that it was like, all right, I'm not that crazy about this barbed wire shit anymore, especially if it's going to end on a dud like that. I think that actually hurt AEW pretty significantly at that time.
Oh, they became a laughingstock for at least a few weeks. That was embarrassing. Holy shit. And Moxley selling it, like, or Kingston with that sell. It's like, oh, God, that was
they didn't know. All you hear is, and you think, well, I guess it went off, because they were covered up. So I felt bad for those guys. I felt bad for Tony. And then I felt bad for Callis because he had to try to change the story. Like, we made it a dud on purpose to fool all the marks. And it's like, okay. Not really, though.
And then Kingston was saying something about he was claustrophobic or he's some sort of excuse of why he overreacted. Like, so bad. Just gotta almost not even bring it up. Just move on. That was bad. That was really bad. That was terrible.
It's like I say, it's interesting to me that AEW, they brought over a lot of my favorites presently and all timers, like Jericho. Punk was there. Omega, Bryan came in. MJF was tearing it up. And it's like all these different pieces are there that would lead me to believe that I really want to watch the show, and I just never do. It's just I think I fell out of love with it, as I said before.
It's so weird because they have some of my favorite wrestlers: Danielson, Samoa Joe. I love Okada. Ospreay is awesome.
Yeah,
they have so many good wrestlers, but it's just like, I don't know. The creative is just not there. It's just, I don't know. Maybe the guys are in the wrong places. It just wasn't that interesting.
Yeah, nobody's gonna out WWE. So you have to find another way to do it. But that doesn't mean Ring of Honor, PWG style epics every third match, every week on TV. It's just, I don't know. Nobody's really figured it out yet, except Eric back in the late 90s.
Yeah, literally. Bischoff is kind of the only one who knew the formula and obviously killed WWF for 2 years basically with it. I know 83 weeks, but it's actually way longer than that. Just killed WWF, and obviously WWF kind of stole some of that stuff. And you'll see that on the Vince doc because Bischoff gets a nice little. He's able to kind of retort, and they actually play a lot of Bischoff on the documentary for McMahon, so that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I get to. It's all jokes, but I get to big time it. I made my wife watch it, and I'm like, "Hey, there's Bruce. I know him. Remember he donated to Jax's thing. Hey, there's Eric. Oh, I got Eric's number. No big deal.
Yes.
Yeah, so I get to fuck with her like that. She's always amazed that kind of I just fell ass backwards into this, and a lot of the guys that I always listen to their shows or watch their shoot interviews is who I work with or have worked with. She's always pretty amazed by that. So as am I.
What a crazy business, right? I mean, it's pretty nuts.
Yeah, and I guess that's where absurd kind of came around too, because I get restless easy. I get I don't want to be complacent, I guess, and I almost feel like I've hit the ceiling on what I would ever do when it comes to being involved in pro wrestling. Like, I don't see a bigger podcast that maybe I could start or work on and I don't think I'll ever get a job working inside, because I went back to school for screenwriting and TV writing in an effort to try to maybe have that background and find my way in. But I stopped. I didn't finish because the podcasting started getting hot. So now I'm just going to be 43. I got no TV writing experience, no degree. Like, what am I going to do? Unless I was like the biggest favor hire ever. Bruce was like, hey, I know a guy who could come in and, be an apprentice or whatever. But I don't even think he remembers me. So.
Hey, look at what is it, WWE Jobs or whatever? Right? They're always hiring writers for Stamford, Connecticut.
Yeah, but it's always like you have to have worked this long on a sitcom, or you have to have this degree, and whatever. And I don't have any of that. All I did was go to school, write some scripts, write a short story, and then I got into podcasting. And that's not much of a resume when you're looking at it in black and white. So
Plus, you can't like start over at 43 and be like, "Yeah, I'll take the assistant writer position for really
sure.
low money." Like you can't do that. Yeah.
No, not at this point. And then it's also like, well, maybe I could go back and finish school. What did it say? I have 2.5 years left. Then I'm 45. They're not high. It's just, I'm too old. I'm too old and I missed it. So trying something else.
Hey, but at least you get to talk to Raven every week, right? I mean, at least you have that.
Yeah, I do like that a lot. I like the shows that I still do. And it's just become a part of my life, really, which is, I mean, it's been 7.5 years of Konnan and Disco, and it's been maybe 5 or 6 with Raven. I think I maybe it was 6. I don't know. I don't know, But
How did that start, by the way, with Raven?
Well, I knew him a little because I was a big Raven mark, and when I got into podcasting, he was curious about that because he knew I started working K100. They were on the same network. He needed help with some things or research or a list, and I'd help him out. I sent him a copy of the book. I had the short story, and he really liked it. And we weren't friends, but he knew who I was, and sometimes we would connect on different things. So I finally got him to do Creative Control when I was still doing it, which is another reason Creative Control kind of fell off because there wasn't anybody left on my list unless it was Vince or Bret Hart or I don't know, Tony Khan or something like that. Like I interviewed all the guys I wanted to. So I finally got the Raven interview and I made sure to change it up. And it was like, I don't even think there was a wrestling question. The only wrestling question was being a Doors mark. I asked him if Jim Morrison influenced, his promos or the Raven gimmick and all that. But aside from that, we talked TV and movies and concerts, and it was just different. And I think he enjoyed the conversation. And at the time, he needed a third guy because he had lost. They had left the Jericho. No, well, the Jericho Network left Westwood 1, and then Raven was kind of left without a home. The Raven Effect. And he went to MLW Radio, and Court Bauer was like, "Hey, this guy Rich Bikini, who was a WWE announcer and stuff like that, he's been working with us, and maybe you guys would be a good combo." And it took that, like they did like 2 shows, and Raven was like, "This isn't really working. It's not meshing well." And I listened to those episodes, and I agree. So, but after our conversation, and I put out the Creative Control interview, he just called me like the next day, and he was like, "Here's what's going on. I'm not sure if I want to do the show anymore because I lost Busby, and I love talking to Busby every week, and now Rich and I don't really know each other." He's like, "Why don't you come on this week? And let's talk Game of Thrones." He wants to talk about the Game of Thrones finale. And we had talked about that briefly on Creative Control. And I was like, sure, all right. And I came on and we just shot the shit and I tried to fit in and all that. And he must have liked it because the next week he was like, "Yeah, come back on." And then that was it. Like now I'm on every week. So yeah, we just got along well. And it's a good little combination on that show. I know it's not as popular as K100 and there's much less to know wrestling, but the personalities between the three of us, I think, makes for a pretty entertaining show.
And I feel like the overstated craziness of certain podcasters that Raven has lost his mind. I feel like that was a bit overstated. That was out of nowhere, I feel like.
Yeah, and it's happened a couple times. I remember the first time. Oh, balloons! I don't know why my StreamYard does that. My balloons just popped up, but
yeah, I just saw that. Wow, that was insane.
It's like emoticons are on, and if I do this, and I don't know. I don't even know how to make it happen, and it's like,
wow.
If you go like this, like something, who knows? But anyway,
wow, I didn't even know StreamYard did that. Wow, interesting.
Yeah. We've been migrating to Zoom more and more. I have to figure that out now, but I can still keep my StreamYard. Just familiar with it, but yeah, I remember Dreamer came out, and in an effort to discuss like the damage wrestling can do or headshots, chair shots. He used Raven as an example, saying like, "Oh, he's so broken down and his mind isn't there anymore." And Raven was like, "What the hell are you talking about? And stop saying that. I'm trying to still get booked every now and then."
Yeah, yeah, really.
An old, senile bastard. And then Stevie did it recently, and I don't know. I haven't known him forever, like maybe 7 or 8 years. Worked with him a little bit less, but being a fan of Raven and just seeing him compete and do interviews and then shoot interviews after that and stuff like that. He's still Raven to me. I don't see. So he might forget something here or there, stumble over a word. I've already done that several times in this interview. I just don't see the connection. I don't see where they get so convinced that he's having problems because I mean he had he had a hip replacement and shoulder or something in the last few years, and then a back problem. He's an old wrestler. He's had some surgeries. I don't know where they get the idea that he's lost his mind because he seems fine to me. Yeah.
A mind is a terrible thing to waste, but I feel like his is still there. I mean, he's just all over the place, but he's always a scatterbrain.
That's what I said. That's what I said to Konnan and Disco too. I was like, dude, does he sound that much like? Isn't he still the same guy? You know, he does jump from this to this, and maybe he forgets some things, but he's always been that way. Disco's like, yeah, that sounds like Raven to me. I played him a clip or whatever, you know. So
Poor Raven. He's getting picked on by all his old rivals. You know, what I mean? They're all back for blood.
Yeah, yeah. Unsolicited drive-bys.
With Raven though, and him and his physical ability, if you will, right now, will he get back in the ring? Can he still wrestle? Will he still take bumps? Because I know he was doing MLW for a little bit. He wasn't necessarily taking bumps. He was kind of giving out some bumps, if you will. He was beating up some guys. Can he still wrestle, or will he still wrestle, or no?
I think he could probably give somebody a DDT, you know. But yeah, it's funny you mention that. I haven't seen it yet, but I know he did that big MLW Battle Royal thing that they do. So yeah, he had to go out over the top. He must have bumped there, right? He DDT Dreamer on the stage at his Hall of Fame. I'm sure he could do a little, but I don't think there's any chance in hell he wants to bump. You know, he'll avoid it. Actually, from what I know from the guys and even him is that he avoided bumping all he could anyway. So I don't think he's going to be doing too much more of that. But he could do a tag match or something like that, I'm sure.
That was so interesting that Stevie's like, oh man, he took so many bumps here and there and the blah, blah, this and that. I'm thinking to myself, he actually I know he did take a lot of crazy bumps, but he kind of avoided it more so than the other guys. I would say Dreamer took way more damage and way more bumps. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Foley, guys like Abyss, a lot of guys. I mean, Raven, he went through tables, he did barbed wire matches, he did shots to the head. But yeah, I agree with you. I thought that too, that you're overstating a little bit. Like he was a hardcore wrestler and stuff, but he wasn't, in King of the Death match in Japan or something. Like he didn't go that far, but he did have physical matches.
When you look at Raven and Dreamer in ECW, are you still mad that Dreamer ended up winning? You know what I mean? Back in '97, before he left WCW, you still pissed about it?
No, I mean I wasn't pissed then. I kind of just figured it made the most sense. I know Raven didn't want to. I think he didn't. No, Dreamer didn't want to win because he wanted it to continue, whenever Raven came back or whenever they met again down the line. But being a fan at the time and seeing on the old Channel 48, what a great couple hours that was. That was like that night after Barely Legal, that show, they did Taz vs. Sabu again. And then they did Raven and Dreamer, which everyone knew Raven was leaving. It was going to culminate the whole thing. And then Dreamer wins, and they turned it right into Van Dam and Sabu attack Dreamer. And WWE's invading, and here's Jerry Lawler. And then after that, Shane was in the ring for something, talking shit, and then somehow Taz challenges him, and they have a match for the TV belt. There was like these 4 excellent stories right in a row, and I remember it took 2 hours of ECW TV, and they just played it, man. It's probably some of the greatest stuff I've ever seen back to back to back ever. It was just like this perfect thread.
Did you like the Raven WCW character when he was kind of almost, I guess you would say, a little bit of a phony?
I think it took them a while to get there with him. Like when he first came in, he was clearly being cheered, so they really put the brakes on it. And we're like, all right, now get out there and whine, And I know, I'm sure he wrote a lot of his own stuff, and he wanted to be a heel, I'm sure too. So his momentum halted then. Then he had like a good run with Page and Benoit, and then it was like he went and took the break, and he came back as like Rich Raven. And somehow, like I remember, like just a few months into it, he was teaming with Saturn, and they were like the most over baby faces on the show. And that was after he came out as like not really poor and grungy. He's a rich kid. Yeah. It just to me spoke to his natural ability to get over and stuff like that. Like people always wanted to cheer Raven. You just didn't get the chance that often. Like we were talking about Ring of Honor. When you see Raven as the babyface against Punk, man, that crowd loved him. And he wasn't an Austin Aries or a Bryan Danielson. He was Raven, so he wasn't necessarily wrestling ROH style, but he's still Raven. And he's still, people loved Raven, still do.
And he really put Punk on the map. I know in TNA, too, he had him in The Gathering with him and my longtime close personal friend, Julio De Niro, a.k.a. Julio Sanchez. But I feel like he really kind of went out of his way. He got Punk over big time.
aka Julio Fantastico, on the what was it, the Legends of Wrestling, or that the worst
Yes.
pay-per-view ever? Is him and Scorp having the only half decent match. Yeah, I think it's weird because they worked together. It was only a few years stretch, but he took Punk to England. He took him to Ring of Honor.
Yep.
TNA, he wanted to use him because it made sense, obviously, those two characters. And then he kind of fell off Raven. I think he had some injury problems and stuff like that. And he wasn't on TV that much for a while. And Punk had already left for OVW and WWE. But you don't hear those guys talk about each other too much, here and there. But I don't know if they had a falling out or if down the line Raven's, upset or disappointed that Punk didn't stay in touch, or maybe it's the other way around. I don't know. But you don't hear those guys mention each other too much. And it was that put Punk on the map, just like you said, 100%.
Yep.
That and then the Joe matches. But definitely first with Raven was where people noticed the guy.
Yeah, I feel like it's definitely not brought up enough, if at all, as far as that relationship. Because Punk, that's how he legit got on like the WWE radar. I mean, that's how he got noticed. And obviously, Gabe tells Heyman. Heyman gets him in the door. I mean, it definitely was on Raven, kind of like even on like Austin, how he got over. People kind of overlook it. Bret Hart kind of got this guy over. You know what I mean? Like for some reason, it always gets overlooked. Some of these guys and what they contribute to other guys' careers.
Reminds me of, I guess, because I didn't watch it. I don't know why, but Undertaker's Hall of Fame speech, he didn't mention Mick Foley one time. And it's like, whoa, wait a minute, bro. Before Foley, you were the Undertaker, but you weren't. I don't think he was the attraction that he became, because his matches with Mabel or Bundy or stuff like that, or Yoko, like, I don't know. He just didn't have a very good run. It was against all these slower moving guys, and Foley made Undertaker more of like an action wrestler, and made him
literally saved his career to me anyway. Because he was all. I think at that point he was awful. Like it was like, oh God, Undertaker. Like,
because of the style, of the plotting style. But Foley turned it into like, let's rev this up, and I'll bump, and and it made him seem more violent and vicious, and then he would take pile drivers and tables, bumps and stuff like that, and. Yeah, Foley, I think, really did prop him up and make him into what he became. And then to hear that he wasn't thanked in the Hall of Fame speech. I know Foley said he was just joking, but I don't think so. I'd take that super personal. And the reason I thought of that is because I was thinking, once Punk goes into the Hall, like, I hope there's a Raven mention, buddy.
Yeah, there better be. Yeah.
Up, all right, So.
Yeah. But Foley made a good point about that. He probably forgot, or what I mean. There's so much others. He's kind of going off the cuff. He doesn't really have a necessarily like maybe a script that he's going after. So he's kind of It seemed like he was almost going more off the cuff. Foley actually forgot to mention his own wife in his speech. So he gave Undertaker a pass. He said, "Well, since I forgot my wife, it's okay that you forgot me."
That was the worst Hall of Fame ever to me, because. It was such an amazing lineup. It was Bruno, Backlund, Booker, Foley, and I can't remember who else, but it was like
Trish, Trump.
I mean, that's like 6 people that all on their own could have headlined the Hall of Fame. And then you got to jam them in. And I think Mick opened it, and I'm like, what the because I was the biggest Mick Foley fan for such a long time. And I was looking forward to it. And then I found out later that his speech was, like 8 minutes or something. I was like, oh, this sucks, man. I'm not even watching. So
crazy, because they had all those guys lined up, and they were actually telling them like, okay, we got to keep it to a certain amount. We want people out of here a certain time. We have the MSG for a certain amount of time. And obviously Bruno was going to be the headline. He was going to go on last, but I almost would have switched around just to give Foley more time. You know what I mean? Get the older crowd that was there to see Bruno, obviously get him out there first, give him 10 minutes. I don't know, whatever you want to give him. But yeah, that was interesting the way that they lined that whole thing up.
I could see that, but then I also think maybe it was more like, respect for your elders. And I mean, we can't ask Bruno to open at Madison Square Garden. Jesus Christ, that's probably all it was. But yeah, I was disappointed for Booker too, that he didn't get a lot of time.
Yeah. And Trump could have been a headliner, like obviously for a Hall of Fame if they wanted to go that route. Like it could have been a lot better. And obviously Vince cut Backlund off because he didn't want Backlund going too long. So
yeah, that's like the year that I was waiting forever, like everyone else was, for Warrior to possibly go in. And then Scott Hall went in the same year as Razor. And, oh, man, I wanted a 20-minute Scott Hall induction. And he was like 6 minutes or less.
Yep.
And fucking Larry Zbyszko went on forever at the beginning. And then Lita went on, and her story's all about Mexico and Lucha. Hey, okay, cool, but let's get to Scott Hall. Let's get to Warrior even, like, goddamn, that Hall of Fame had me so frustrated too.
Well, you know what happens? Zabisco lost his speech, so he couldn't. He was trying to remember what he had written down, and he couldn't remember, so he kind of kept repeating himself and
He
going
did.
on. He was trying to catch himself. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You know, it's a great little Larry Zabisco tidbit I'll give you. I used to talk to him a bunch. I probably should call him and see what he's up to, but I would always call him, pray that he wouldn't answer, and then have him call me back, and I won't answer. You think for a second, like think I'm being rude. No, because he would always leave an anecdote on my voicemail.
Right,
And I
right.
love his voice and I love his commentary. I
Yeah,
thought it was great. So he'd be like, John, you know what? He goes, I just finished 18 holes of golf. I played pretty good. Hit par. Like he always gave a story. So
yeah,
I would purposely call him, pray he didn't answer, and then hopefully call back. So I sent it to voicemail and I still have him saved. There's like 3 1-minute little anecdotes from him on my phone. So I don't know. I love Larry Z, but yeah, his speech was not good.
yeah. He's a great storyteller and orator, if you will. But I was
Yeah,
looking for Scott. I was waiting for Scott to get his
yeah,
moment.
yes. He should have. Even Jake, I remember his speech was kind of short.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I forgot about that. Yeah, Warrior, Jake, and Scott were like my guys. You know, I always was a big fan of especially Scott and Jake. And then Warrior, I was a fan when I was a kid, and always found him pretty fascinating. And, you know, his stuff he went through the years and popping up and leaving, and then his crazy ass website. And I was always following Warrior to see what was next. You know,
Yeah.
and did you ever see the reality show pilot that he did?
No, but somebody mentioned that to me the other day, and I was like, oh, I got to find it. Then I forgot to try to find it.
Yeah, I can't. For some reason, the band name Askin Alexandria is in my head, and that could just be made up. I'm not even sure if that's a real band, but I swear that was the band. And he was like gonna get them healthy and into shape, and they were all strung out from the road and all this, and you know he's making them exercise and screaming at them warrior style, and it was really entertaining. I found it on YouTube, but it was a long time ago, so I don't know if it's still out there or not. But that would have been great.
Wow, damn. Just so much fun stuff. You look at Warrior, like the comic book, Warrior University. What a character, like some of that stuff.
Yeah, the most unbelievable thing I ever saw was when I was listening to MLW radio, and out of nowhere it was like interview with Ultimate Warrior. I'm like, what? Like, how did they? It was just MSL interviewing Warrior. And it was
Wow.
like 4 or 5 parts, and it was fascinating. It was one of the first times that you really heard his version of holding Vince up, quote end quote. You know, and which when you look at it, it was framed to make him really the bad guy when he was just a guy looking for his share, basically, and burned
Yeah.
out and frustrated. But it was the first time I heard a lot of stories from him, and it was like it was on this, you know, small podcast network. I think it was behind the paywall, and I was like, wow, how did they get him to do this? You know, like I don't know, MSL
Yeah.
has the ability to pull some strings, so that was pretty awesome. If anybody has that, or maybe I'll check with them because I think the MLW radio archives mostly disappeared.
Damn, that's an awesome one to get. Jeez, because he didn't do. I mean, he did some interviews, but not really. It's,
It
the
was
one for
weird.
WB and stuff. That's awesome.
It was like 2012 or something. It was before the Hall of Fame, and it was just like it just dropped. I'm like Warrior, like what the hell, you know? So that maybe I'll be able to find that someday.
I love it. Now let's wind it down. Let's head towards the finish. What's next for K100? What's next for Raven? What's next for Creative Control? What's next with Absurd? What is next?
Well, the Raven Effect, we're working on moving it over to Believe, and I think what they want is they want 2 shows a week.
Oh, wow.
It's the podcasting game now, as you well know, is it's it used to be everyone waits all week to hear their favorite show, and now that's not the case. Now everybody drops clips on YouTube every single day, or they release podcast episodes 4 or 5 days a week.
Yep.
That's why I had K100. After I moved us to Spreaker, I was looking at the money, and I was like, geez, if I just put out a best of, we can make another couple bucks. And then that turned into, let's do sports. Let's do a political pop culture one, and we'll put it out as talks. And let's put out the K100 reviews I just started doing because it was, there's an open day. What can I put out? What can I bombard the K100 fans with today? So the Raven Effect thing, they're like, the numbers are good. If you take your hour, 10 minutes and split it into 2 shows a week, we'll all do a lot better. So Raven has to decide if he wants to do that. I don't see why he wouldn't. It's not going to make any difference. It'll just be cut at 30 minutes, and then the next 30 minutes airs on Thursday or whatever. So that's what we're hoping for with that. It'll still be the same, ridiculous
just
show.
More work for you. Yeah.
No, I don't produce it. I just co-host.
Oh, you don't?
Yeah.
Oh.
No.
Oh.
Our producer's a guy named Robert, and I guess he's worked
Oh,
with
okay.
Raven all along. They know each other, and he's very good at a quick turnaround, which sometimes I'm not. So, and I prefer it like, dude. Years ago I was burnt out on all that editing and shit. So I use
Yeah.
all this AI now for K100, and it's just been a lifesaver. But K100, what's up next? I don't know. We got the Hardy Boys coming out. I don't know when this will air, but it'll be out on Thursday the 26th because it'll come out as its own episode. Because if I wait to put it on K100 main show, it's going to be out after the shows that they're promoting happen. They're promoting their 2 TNA shows this weekend. So that's going to come right out. We got Meltzer in a week or two. Dave Meltzer.
Wow. Wow.
K100 return, but there's a condition. What do you think the condition is?
No disco.
Fucking no disco, man.
Damn.
But I think at the same time, Dave's a fascinating guest. I think
Dave is an awesome guest, to be honest.
I never got him. I almost had him. That was one guy I wanted on Creative Control. But again, nobody knew me from a can of paint, and Dave was always pretty cool. Like, I understand how much work he does in his schedule, and it was like, yo, if you can ever fit it. He's like, I'm really trying, but we just never got it done. But I like I say on K100 on the YouTube a lot, like, I'm not a Dave hater. Like, Dave hate has become such the thing, and I'm like, you're not going to convince me to just hate this guy because he has a star rating system and he likes what he likes. But I think his Twitter persona doesn't help, and I'm going to tell him that on the show.
Yeah. Well, he's being a bit ornery on there, and he's really not ornery in real life. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It's like, if all this Twitter nonsense bugs you and you're sick of opening up your Twitter feed to see a bunch of dumb fucks talking about you, then stop responding. Or if don't respond in the way you've been responding. I think it's.
But those same people were saying that he sucked on the Vince doc, and they didn't like him on the Mr. McMahon Netflix doc. He's great on it. He's very honest and open. I mean, obviously he's gonna maybe say some stuff that they don't want to hear about Vince, I guess, but I think Meltzer comes off good on it. I think.
Yeah, I only saw the first part, but he was fine to me. He was just Dave. But again, I've been an Observer subscriber more so lately just to have access to it for the shows. But I used to listen to Observer Radio every day almost if Dave was on it when I was really into it.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Hell yeah.
So that'll be interesting. With Creative Control, we moved some shows to Believe. I think Business of the Business will be the next one on that list.
Yes.
That's been fun and interesting. I mean, unfortunately, you suffered a loss. We suffered a loss. The wrestling world and his family. We lost Kevin Sullivan. Yep. The guy from Believe actually emailed me. He's like, God damn. He's like, I'm so sorry to hear. He's like, I don't know if you guys were close. I was like, no, not really, but I did, handle the show for some time, and they were kind of like blown away. Like, wow, we just signed this show up, and it was like, dude, what, like 6, 7, 8 days after the first episode aired, Kevin passed.
Yeah,
it's crazy. But we'll move some shows there. Right now, I got Cab Manning and his Wrestlingus show. He puts out 4 reviews a week. We've got Awesome Pod, which is AEW some Awesome Pod. 2 shows a week. They have an interesting collection of hosts. It was actually recommended to me by Chris Jericho, so that's how we became in contact. But it turns out that they're good people. They put out a good product, and they're very on time, which I need to learn to be better with them, along with everybody else. And then of course, Biz is still on their Business of the Business. You've had some big episodes lately. Dr. Tom's always doing good stuff. Husey puts out an episode here and there. But Creative Control Network, I mean, I don't know what. I mean, my expectations were always pretty realistic. It was like, let me see what I can do. I can maybe help people. I can maybe make a couple bucks for myself. And just, YouTube became the hot thing. And now, I don't get as many calls about ads. And it's just, I don't know if it's going to fade. I don't think it'll ever fade away. I'm not trying to say I'm going to stop. But I think Creative Control Network just is always going to be like that place for people to, plant their shows and try to make a couple bucks. And maybe if you're a newer show, try to get some recognition and stuff like that. So I don't consider it like a big giant platform or anything like that. It's kind of a place I initially started to have a few different shows on there. Then it grew into like, let me help Husey, let me help Durbin, let me put Get My Go on here, let me put Dean shows on Creative Control Network as well, United States of Australia. So he's on there doing a comedy show, and I'm happy with Creative Control Network. I wish the market was different, and I wish it was easier to get smaller shows exposure, but we do what we can. We all do okay. And then with Absurd, shocker, I don't have much of a schedule in mind. It's kind of just going to be like, but I mean, at least once a week. I put out the intro show. I put out a show the other day, and I have a planned recording on Sunday, as well as probably I think the next show I'll do solo would be about the whole Diddy thing. And then Monday, so far, I'm going to be recording with two military veterans that the K100 audience is familiar with. And I just wanted to talk about their experiences in the military and stuff like that and coming home. And then I really want to dig into what they think about the current state of the world and the different wars that are either currently going on or are definitely going to start. And what made me think of that was Kamala Harris's comment at the debate where she said, we currently have no soldiers in an active war zone. And like the next day, it's all over TikTok. These soldiers that are stationed around the world in active war zones are going, what? Like, where am I then? What the fuck? So I wanted to get their take on that and stuff like that. I'm trying not to, I don't want to be Breitbart or something. It's not, the perception is going to be what it is. I don't want it to be, it's not like a right-wing opinion show. It's just how I feel about how the country's going and different stories. And like I said, we'll dig into some of the scumbags in entertainment and a lot of their recent DEI failures and stuff like that. I started watching shows like Nerdrotic and Ryan Kinnell and Heel versus Babyface, and those guys kind of inspired me to go that route because I realized that there was some people out there on YouTube now that weren't holding back and made a business of it. And I was like, you know what? Why have I been pussing out? I'm just going to try. And it's going to take a minute because my YouTube is dead. I mean, I never use it. These episodes are not going to pop up unless you search them. And so I got a lot of work to do there. But yeah, the idea is put out a couple a week on a variety of subjects and then make something out of the YouTube if I can. So that's what's going to happen with Absurd.
Where could everybody follow you, social media-wise?
Well, I got rid of my Twitter, which in hindsight was a mistake. I wanted to just get off there for a little while and get through some things and just chill out. And when I went to get it back, it had been past 30 days, and they zapped it. I was like, oh, shit. Like, I missed it by like a day. I was like, oh, man. So, I wasn't, burning the world down. I had like 5,000-something followers, but that's still 5,000 people that you can initially expose things to, and then they retweet and all that. That's how the game works. So I lost that, but I'm at the CC Network 1. I still comment on there and share things. And then I'm at K100 Konnan, where I don't use that for myself, really. I just promote K100. And then if I know you, look for me on Facebook or Instagram, and perhaps I'll accept you, But yeah, I think I really screwed myself with that Twitter deletion or Twitter reprieve, but that's all right. I'll figure out a way around it.
Nice. Awesome stuff. Good luck
let me say now that, while we're wrapping up, with Creative Control Network, like I said, that nobody's going to get rich and stuff, but I do put a good amount of effort in it and trying to build new connections. And shows have come and shows have gone. But right now, I'm interested in bringing on another true crime show. I had Outlaws and Gunslingers on for a while with Bang and Dang.
Yeah.
And that show actually was a tight competitor with Taskmaster Talks to be number 1 on CCN. People are way into true crime, and those guys did their research, and they had a certain sense of humor that people enjoyed. So I'd like to have a true crime show on there again. I wouldn't mind having a sports show, straight up sports. And then if there's anyone, I wouldn't mind also having that type of pop culture show that goes over movies and comics and TV shows and all that. And so I'm always open to hear new ideas. If anyone's listening that has a pod or started a pod and it's something that's a little different, not necessarily looking for wrestling right now. I mean, I don't know how much more we can stand, right? So if you're just doing a Raw review, I probably wouldn't want to do that. But if you're doing something else outside the box, even politics, even left-wing politics, I don't really care. And you're looking for a place to call home and someone to kind of try to show you the ropes and maybe get you a few bucks here and there, then at the CC Network 1 on Twitter or creativecontroljff@gmail.com.
All right. Awesome stuff, Feeney. Thank you so much for all the time. Really appreciate it.
You got it, man.